Welcome to the Art of War in the Wild mini-conference. I'm your host, Sayal Hur. This mini-conference is composed of a few panel conversations focused on the real-world application of timeless wisdom. The backdrop is that we are in a world experiencing a leadership crisis on a global scale across various dimensions, both personal and professional, private and public, among many other dimensions, resulting in widespread struggle and suffering. Much of what we're experiencing stems from embracing an almost Pollyannish perspective that romanticizes leadership, human nature, and reality, sterilizes our organizations and enterprises, and infantilizes people in leadership roles, among others. When in reality, we should be embracing a more realistic perspective that integrates every aspect of human nature and reality, including the good, the bad, and the ugly. The Art of War, or the Sun Tzu, provides profound timeless insights into leadership, strategy, culture, conflict, execution, and much more, offering approaches for surviving and thriving in today's reality. The objective of these conversations is to engage a few forward thinkers and forward doers who are reshaping the modern world through the wisdom of the art of war, to explore the gap between principles and practice where reality and theory converge, to explore applying ancient wisdom to modern-day scenarios, highlighting the dynamics between intentions and outcomes, and to illuminate insights for engaging in challenging environments. Welcome to the Art of War in the Wild mini-conference.
Welcome to everyone.
Hello. Hello,
guys.
It's good to have you, and we welcome our guests likewise, whether you're listening to the recording or joining us live for our third panel. And without wasting any time from this valuable conversation to unfold, I would love for each of you to introduce yourselves briefly, and we'll dive right in. And we'll perhaps Cynthia to kick us off.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cynthia Chambers, and I am an IT professional who had the pleasure of working with Cy and Chris in a transformation for an IT organization of about 700 people. And so that was my first introduction to the art of war. And my mindset coming in was all conflict is bad conflict. And so I was a prime candidate for this work. Happy to be here.
Excellent. Todd, my friend.
Yeah, Sai, thanks so much for inviting me to participate in this conversation today. I've been looking forward to talking to Cynthia and Chris and Mudasir about this, as well as yourself. I am a specialist in building community strategies and helping to help organizations put together online community spaces that are safe, sane, make sense, and sustainable over time. My company is Clock Tower Advisors. I've got a couple of other fingers in different startups and work that I do, but I'm often brought on as a fractional leader of online communities to help organizations put their visions into play to help better connect whether it's their employees or their customers or other sorts of stakeholders. So Sun Tzu is often on my mind in my work.
Excellent. And any more sanity that you can offer and bring in, I think the world can use. So thank you for all the sanity that's there already, but even more would be appreciated. Thank you, Todd. Excellent. Chris, my friend.
Yes. Hi, Sai. Hi, Todd, Mudasir, and Cynthia. Yes, as Cynthia said, she and I worked together with Sai on a large transformation initiative. I had the honor and the privilege of being invited into that transformation initiative. I was part of a technology team leading a small product team of BAs at the organization, and it just didn't look like it was going very well. So that was an opportunity for me to affect change. And my introduction to the art of war was perhaps a little informal in that Sai really showed us the learnings of the art of war before even sharing the wisdom of the art of war. So since then, and even prior to that engagement, I've always worked in the product space, primarily in big media companies. but also most recently, I was a chief product officer at a sports education startup. So since having my eyes opened through that experience, I've brought the lessons and the learnings of the art of war everywhere I've gone since then, and really tried to use it as a way of seeing each new experience I have, really with clear eyes, is what I would say. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking with you all about this today. And as Sai and Cynthia know, I'm pretty open book, so I don't hesitate to ask any questions directly. So yeah.
Wonderful. Welcome. And last but definitely not least, Mudasir.
Hello, everyone. As you all know, I am Mudasir. I am a coach, consultant, and agile practitioner who focuses on enhancing teams' performance. I partnered with multiple organizations and hundreds of teams and in a groups to help achieve the business outcomes by delivering good quality work products. And about the art of war, and my introduction to art of war is naturally I am curious. I have a keen eye on human interactions and the dynamics around what happens in a room in a professional setup or beyond. Having said that, uh, art of war helped me to be more deliberate, more intentional, and more focused on dealing the conflicts and get to a point where it is win-win. And without getting into the details of art of war, essentially that's my brief introduction. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, definitively, you've already started to touch the points all around, but we would love to kind of sort of be introduced to really your perspective as to what the art of war means to you in particular.
Yeah. I'll jump in if that's okay. The art, it's funny. I don't use that phrase a lot. The art of war. It's really just, for me, it's a perspective. It's an awareness. It's an opening. It's the groundings and the foundation of all of that allows you to see things in a different perspective, under different light. But what it means to me is, any time that I've been in an environment, and even before I even met Sai, anytime I've been in an environment before or after where I was struggling, or the environment was ambiguous, or it was just unclear, I've always strived to, enact the lessons that are there in the art of war. The lessons like building alliances and relationships, right, as the way to get through uncomfortable or stressful situations. The lesson of taking a step back and looking at the entire picture. But as I keep coming back to the art of war and to the book and to the lessons, it's really interesting to me how it just becomes part of my thinking. It's in everyday life, and whether it's a small startup or a 75,000 person organization, the lessons apply. The lessons apply to parenting, frankly. If you really think about it, the lessons apply to engaging with someone in a store, when you're trying to get something done. I mean, it's so I guess that's what I would say. What it means to me is it's part of my thinking now. It's not separate. It's not something I read once a year and come back to or something. It's just part of who I am. And I think it was I didn't think about this before this very moment, but I think I had been operating that way, and it really helped me understand why I was operating that way. Yeah.
How about others?
I had I reacted immediately to what you said, Chris, that it's sort of become part of my life. I think when Sai asked if I wanted to be a part of this panel. I read The Art of War a long time ago. I come back to it from time to time. I get new translations, just to kind of see what different people will say about it over time. But I think I had a similar kind of visceral reaction to say, like, well, this is kind of fully metabolized for me. It's part of the system, and so to kind of peel myself back from it, I found myself a little anxious, saying, like, what am I going to say about this? Because it's kind of like there for me as part of the what is it, the radiation background noise of the universe. It's just kind of been in my head for so long that I think I just kind of naturally fall back on some of those ideas and lessons. But so much I've drawn from it, and it's not just it's certainly not just warfare that he's talking about. That, like so much good literature, you can be talking about something that is very, very specific and a little microcosm that is reflective of a broader world or broader truths that are there. So as Sun Tzu talks about things like advantage or strong and weak points or deception even, it applies in a lot of different spaces in our lives. And I think that's why this particular work has had such a long life, and people keep coming back to it again and again and again.
Yeah. I want to comment on that, but I want others to go. But go ahead.
I was just going to agree with both you and Todd that I'm naturally becoming the sage commander in my environments. I'm naturally taking hold and taking action based on what's presented before me. I'll say I prided myself on being in control and keeping things in order, if you will, and having the opportunity to work with Sai to wreck my normal for 18 months. He made me comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I'm not sure if y'all had the experience I had it from the coaching perspective, being coached and not, to Chris's point, seeing it worked before being introduced to it. And then learning how to coach others through that lens. And so I am always amazed at how I show up because of the art of war. And that's because I'm no longer wanting to be the first person that speaks. I'm going to sit back and observe the room and get a read on the room before I contribute. And so it's those little innuendos that are nuances, let me say that I'm shaped by the art of war.
Interesting. That's really good.
Wonderful. And I kind of resonate with what all three of you has shared, Chris, Todd, and Cynthia, as art of war is broad. And then how I bring into practice is, for me, the constant is OODA loop, where I observe, orient, decide, act. And it is so natural for me in whatever the context. I mastered it, and it's purely based on understanding the human interactions and dynamics, and to get to win-win. And when I took the literature of art of war, or actually read it for the first time, and with focus, that is kind of an aha moment or a realization that this is unknowingly or unintentionally I am practicing it, but there is much more to it, like what we are calling as a taking hold. There is win-win, and beyond win-win there is nothing. There is no win-lose or lose-win or lose-lose. And then being aware, being mindfulness and presence, and the sage commander, and the exercise of the strength. And many leaders in our professions, or many or some, that is debatable, but some people aren't aware of the strength or power they possess, and how they can manifest that to bring the outcome or what we are trying to accomplish, and few of them knows it, but they cannot exercise it or practice it. And then working with chaos, such as in naturally so, as most of us are dealing with IT organizations, software development is volatile and it is constantly changing and evolving. So how can we deal with that, with product and engineering, various aspects of that, without getting into details or nuances of that? uh, and that connects to my initial point where I said that I become much more intentional and deliberate once I got hold of art of war literature, and then reading over it, and reflecting on what I have been doing and I have been observing with fellow leaders and peers. So that's my experience, as well as what is art of war for me.
Love that.
So you folks mentioned a whole bunch of great stuff. How natural we internalize it, how we show up, metabolization. It's a part of us. So I want to pose. There's a number of questions that come to my mind in listening to, but I want to pose one that sort of very, very crucial, which I honestly don't think has been explored enough. Is that, do you feel like that children have it? Do children have this almost innate perspective, as you mentioned, Chris, amongst other things? Do they have it, and does something happen along the way?
Well, first of all, using a broad term like children, it's very broad, right? So I think maybe you mean do humans have from birth, right? Is it there?
Exactly.
And maybe it gets beaten out of us for various reasons, depending on our environment, our circumstances, our education, our socioeconomic status, our experience with the world. Yeah, I think there's something to it, right? And commenting on, tying that to what one of the things Todd said in his intro, it's just this way. If you agree with the concept that we mentioned here, which is it's just a way of seeing the world, engaging with the world. If you never read this book, you could be a sage commander, right? I think that's what you're getting at, Sai. You absolutely could. And some seem to be born naturally that way. I'm not sure if they're born naturally that way or if it's just a byproduct or an outcome of what they've been exposed to in their life. But to answer your question, I would say yes. I mean, why would we think that humans couldn't be born natural leaders, right? Of course. Yeah.
How about thoughts from the other good folks? Yeah.
Yeah, I think back to that, the old cliche of, a child is going to ask mom and dad, for a favor, and you go to the parent who is going to offer the least resistance to begin with, because you want the ally. That there's some Sun Tzu in that. Let's go to the weak points. But I don't know. I struggle with this a little bit, because I think, but also, I think that there's maturity that we need to apply some of those lessons as well.
To apply them, yes.
Yeah. So that necessity to stand back and watch first, to not give into the emotional need to do something showy, or in Sun Tzu's terms, like to attack the fortified city because you're angry and you want to prove a point that you can take it down. That's a child's reaction to those kinds of situations.
A lot of childish leaders, Todd.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And so it's interesting. I was just showing Sai before I got on the call with the rest of you all. I'm reading a newer version of this. It's a graphic novel that replays The Art of War. It's I'm not getting paid by them to do a product placement. It's Canterbury Classic Books if anyone's interested in it. But what made me think of this is the frame. It's not just a translation of The Art of War, but it's framed in terms of a young boy with a sifu, learning and asking questions, about having a dialogue with his master about that time, and he does innately understand a lot of the lessons there, and is kind of reflecting, saying, "Well, I hadn't thought about that, but it does make sense that this is the way that we would approach a conflict." So my relationship to your question is complex, Sai.
Indeed. All good things. Cynthia, what is your thoughts from your perspective, or likewise?
The one
Sure.
thing that came to mind, you want to go, Melissa?
No, please go ahead.
When you said child, it took me backside to a conversation we had where you explained a child as is, like they're seeing life as is. They're not.
Yeah, they're very present.
To be
Yeah.
something that it's not their past experiences shaping their view, if you will. And we had this conversation because Syed gave me feedback from a coaching perspective. He was coaching me and he gave me some feedback. He said, "Cynthia, you need to let go of the history." And that was profound to me because I'm like saying, And during our one-on-one, I asked them, how do I let go of the history without leaving the company? And he didn't respond to that question. He said, "I want you to choose one. I want you to choose either the camel, the lion, or a child." And the camel was carrying a load, the lion was raw, and the child was as is. And I had picked camel. And he says, ideal is the child.
Yeah.
But the way to get to the child, for me, from being a camel, was to get through the roar, go through the lion. And what that did was it spoke volumes to me because I got my voice back. I needed to get my voice back before I can get to that place of being as is and being let go of the history. But when you said child, it's so simplistic. And so it's the word, not naive, it's innocence as a child, that it's not pre-shaped or what have you based on their past lens, and it can be taught. But no, definitely children have more of awareness than adults, and that's only because we're no longer pre-shaped as based on our past. So
Certainly, most certainly, as we are all talking about these points, maybe applicable to children or in general, as Chris mentioned, human race. I personally feel the fundamental characteristic of a human is willingness to do what willingness to do anything to bring something they want, or for someone, or a victory or a goal. So that is the fundamental, and on top of that, that's where all the characteristics, morals, and how the leadership skills and exerting the strength, power, all that comes into play, and influencing people, not manipulating people. So that factors come into play right from childhood all the way to the adults and leaders. And then, as we were talking about, there are a lot of childish leaders. So speaking of all this, irrespective of this is race, culture, agnostic, all these behaviors exist, and rightly so. That is some part of Sage Commander. What we get to know in Art of War.
I agree.
Chris, were you going to add something? I thought you were going to say
Yeah, I mean, it's just a deeper thought, and I kind of touched on it a minute ago. You're. I think, Todd, you said this. You need a certain amount of maturity to appreciate and apply the lessons of the art of war. But there's many very successful folks who don't have that maturity. And then there are many, it's probably a young child is probably hard, but I assume based on my experience as a parent, once a kid has a certain level of awareness themselves, they're kind of applying it without even recognizing it, even in the moment, right? Because kids live in the moment for the most part. So there's something there for me too. It's like a maturity curve before you can be introduced to it formally and appreciate it for what it is. Yeah.
And just on the line of maturity, Chris, since you brought it up,
Yeah.
there's a part in the book that says that we must first know ourselves.
Yeah.
And what are our own thoughts, so that we can put it in the right perspective when we're looking out and seeing, when we're taking hold, making sure that we've already taken hold inwardly before we can look outward. So that's along the lines of maturity.
Yeah.
And if I'm remembering that right, I think Sun Tzu brings up that self-knowledge first before knowing the opponent or the situation that's opposing you. Let's maybe put it in those terms. I love that.
Yeah, I think you're right, Todd. And in fact, I know you're right. But the interesting thing to me is so many successful leaders at any size organization, could be a 2-person small consultancy or a 50,000 person company. They may have never looked inward, right? They've never gotten uncomfortable with themselves, but yet are successful. So I think society tends to look at, certain levels of achievement as success, but the Sage Commander doesn't look at that. The Sage Commander has their own definition of success, and then takes action accordingly. Yeah.
So if I can chime in just to identify a few anchors and have you folks kind of talk to them and see if there's also stories you want to share. There's definitively awareness that we've touched on, right? There's innateness to it. There's maturation. And I love the way that you described it. There's an appreciation along with application. If you don't appreciate it, you can't apply something. Respectfully, I find a lot of people that trying to apply something before they really appreciate it.
Yeah, that's just false. Yeah.
Well said. Very well said. And then there's another factor. I don't think this was mentioned, but I want to throw it in. There's conditioning that happens, right? There's social conditioning. There's other forms of conditioning. Using the word from the art of war, forming. About form. That's a notion of conditioning. And then also you tied in success. Is success, whatever that might mean in this context or in any context, how much of it is intentional versus happenstantial? And the power of Sun Tzu to help it become intentional versus happenstantial. A whole bunch of things, but I'd love kind of for you folks to take any angle and any stories to share around those different angles.
Well, from the appreciation and I'm always we're like right at the same time. I'm letting you go first this time.
Thank you. So one thought crossed to my mind is applying the principles of art of war without or not taking hold is more detrimental. That is one way of seeing it. And another way is we talked about the maturity aspect. Some people can actually use art of war, be a sage commander, and instead of taking hold, they can hurt the ecosystem or people in their context. And it is a double-edged sword, and who is using and how that is getting used, and that is where the distinction between manipulation and influence comes. And that's what I was thinking while you all folks were discussing. And rather than getting into any specific examples, one thing comes to my thought is few leaders don't take the whole or don't understand the breadth of that, and they want to work in the chaos rather than taking the bigger view or holistic view. They will directly jump into the deeps of that and get stuck in that, and in that process they get lost of taking hold and what we are doing, and in whatever the context. Taking hold is the way how I present taking hold is win-win. And then the sage commander needs to do whatever it requires to achieve a goal, and in that process few leaders tend to forget what is taking hold across organization, and they end up only focusing on themselves or a specific department or entity, which is not necessarily healthy. It may yield short term returns, but in long run that is more detrimental.
And that leads right into what I was going to speak about, Mudasir, the not taking hold. If you notice, some leaderships focus on the mechanics of their issues, being people, processes, and tools, and are not even aware of the dynamics that are happening, how we're communicating, relating to one another, and some of the behaviors that we're allowing to happen in the environment.
Yeah.
I can remember a simulation that we did for all of the senior management, from VPs, their directors, down to their first level management. We had them all in a room. And this was to give them a dose of the reality that the people that's underneath them are dealing with on a day-to-day, moment-by-moment basis, which was the uncertainty, the just think of being put in teams of 5, and you have a project manager, a BA, a developer, a product manager, and you're to set out with the goal to make a product. But then throughout the simulation, Sai would throw in nuances. He would take a resource from them, just to see how their behavior would be, and we can observe it from the outside looking in. But it gave them an awareness of real time what was happening underneath them, outside of their control, and gave them a deeper appreciation, I think, for what they were dealing with, the people that they were managing. And I think that awareness set the stage for the OODA loop, Mudasir, that you had mentioned, that observe, orient, make a decision, and then act, and then repeat it, and just keep reorienting until you actually get from where you are to where you want to be. But I just remember that was a huge impact for me, just to witness how people interact with each other when you have uncertainty and chaos, and just all of the things, taking resources from you to adding more requirements, to just imagine putting that in a simulation and allowing your management to rise to the level of awareness so that they can actually, move forward and make some contribution to the transformation.
Yeah.
I wonder, Cynthia, is sort of thinking about leaders that maybe haven't got that dynamics awareness. If I'm thinking back to some of my own experiences where, like, I would have people on my team who would see that I was somebody that liked to try a lot of different technologies. I was always sort of experimenting and like pulling in new things, and from their perception, there was this chaos of stuff that I was doing, but what they weren't seeing is that I was very deliberately tossing things out as I didn't need them. And they just continued to kind of grind on with some of those tools, not perceiving that was sort of the outcome was to figure out what works for you and for your processes. I wonder if, by the same token, and I think Mudasir was getting at this a little bit too, that leaders kind of feel like that's what they're supposed to do, is to kind of grind through the chaos until they figure out what seems to be working, that they've got to flail and until that's what, as a leader, I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to seem very confident and move into the chaos, and something good will come out of it. As Sai was talking about, sort of those happenstance versus intentionality. It's very interesting. But by the same token, like where I struggle with this is, that sense of an agile approach, or like Sai has turned me on to Colonel John Boyd and some of his stuff and sort of his assessment of military history, where, you try a lot of different fronts to see what works, and where you see the weak points, that's where you end up, putting in more energy, into your effort. That relationship with chaos is a complex one, but I wonder if every leader sees those things. Sorry, that was kind of all over the place.
No. But yeah. let's go there for a second, Todd. Is that even leadership? I mean, just grinding through something, coming to work every day and grinding through that. I mean, what value is that leader actually providing, right? I mean,
you should be making it easier.
Maybe, or maybe if he's intentional, maybe he's pushing the team to create that chaos so that they can grow as well. But my experience is there's very few folks like that. They're after in the leadership suite, if you will, the old ivory tower. They're after how things feel. Certainly they're after results, right? Especially if they're a C-level executive, they're after certain results. But mostly I feel like my experience with folks is they're after a certain feel. If things feel good and the outcomes of the organization satisfy shareholder demand, that's kind of good enough for them. Or investor demand.
If they're feeling good,
in the world of startups, yeah, I think that's enough, right? And that's my experience anyway, Todd. I don't know from your perspective. Yeah.
If they're feeling good at the expense of their team.
Yeah, my point is they might not even notice.
How do you bypass the chaos? Because you want them at their highest level of contribution, right? And if it feels good for you because it's showing your numbers on paper, but you got people that's working double time and, covering for those that aren't doing the work. I mean, there could be a lot of dysfunction going on.
Yeah.
Hence, not looking at the dynamics and how we communicate with each other.
100% agree. Yeah. Sometimes they try to
put more resources on it, or
or someone else will worry about what the team's dealing with on a day-to-day basis. I love this. It's a small anecdote, but I've spent a lot of my career working in New York City. There's one CEO of a very famous financial institution that you all have heard of that went out of business. I won't name it by names, but he had a new building built in New York City, and he had a car elevator installed so that when he pulled into the building, it brought him to his floor. He'd never even walked through the lobby. The elevator, the security guards would clear the sidewalk so that he could pull in, very busy Midtown Manhattan building. The car would pull in up, I think it was 55th floor or something. The building was 50 odd floors. And so not only did he not engage with the team ever, he literally never wanted to see them.
Wow.
I mean, just the most visible example of someone who was phenomenally successful. Well, until the company wasn't, which is what happens when you don't pay attention to the team. But just literally was uncomfortable interacting with people in any way whatsoever. I mean, the pure opposite of a sage commander, in my opinion.
Yeah. So this brings me to a point where a conflict at a strategy level, and then based on Todd, what you're saying, grinding out, and then the way Chris, you're explaining, leaders, once they reach to or close to ivory tower, they don't want to have a conflict among themselves, so that they don't even want to engage in any discussions, and then and the feel good factor is dismissed. Having said that, the conflict is in leadership, the conflict is not there. They only see conflict as interdepartmental or something that has to be happen at mid to bottom layers. Whereas what the vision and the purpose, or whatever we call, uh, there itself there can be a conflict among the group of people. And if there is a vision statement of an organization or an entity, and even as a group of people are working towards it, there need to be a conflict to refine and make it much more crisp. And that is what I could sense that is lacking at the leadership level. And some of the examples that you guys are quoting is what I'm getting to that. And more than at the leadership level, the conflicts is at the ground level, and that's where the team struggles sometimes, because the leaders is not fully aligned. Is my take on what the experiences that you are sharing.
So it's easy to bypass and have that feel good feeling.
Yeah, and then ultimately they don't converge, and that's where the taking hold comes in. And sometimes if they don't converge and manifest into a good outcome, then that's waste of effort, or that's just a siloed effort where you may or may not realize the value.
Yeah, I feel like we're beating up leadership in this conversation, maybe a little too much, but yeah. Go ahead, Sai. Were you about to say something?
Yeah. So a lot of dimensions to it. There's a few questions that really come up going through this. One is, how do we look at conflict, right? That's one aspect of it. How do we look at chaos? Exactly as you folks mentioned. Cynthia mentioned, and this is very core, Nietzsche's three metamorphoses, if you will, the camel, the lion, and the child. But I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Take everything that you've said, and I want to put a challenging question here, and you don't have to answer it if you don't want to hear, but I would encourage you to think about it. If you were going to choose one point of reference, book, story, whatever it might be, one point of reference that you would use to introduce the concept of leadership to someone, what would it be? It could be anything.
Just one.
That's the stress, is to get you down to one. Exactly. Not easy one. Yes.
I don't know. I mean, there's conflict in everyday life, so I go back to that all the time, right? Is a leader comfortable with conflict? I've certainly worked in many different roles. I've been promoted to many different levels, and and I've worked for good leaders and not so good leaders. But the ones that, regardless of, again, how they were promoted or what their success looks like, the ones that I've been drawn to, I will say, are comfortable with conflict. They don't lose sleep over it. They just know that it's part of life. They, look for more information in order to make a decision. They're not afraid to make a decision. They're not paralyzed by conflict that might come up, small or large. That large, reorgs that I've been through, that where hundreds of people were let go and people were moved around like pieces on a chessboard for no logical reason whatsoever. But there were leaders in those situations that stood out to me. And that seems to be the one characteristic that I would go to, is they're in fact, there's one leader I'm thinking of in particular. He has a phrase where I remember he would say to me a lot when I would come to him, I'd say, "Oh, this is happening," or "That's happening," or someone's thinking about leaving, or I hear there's a reorg on the horizon, he would say, that's just noise. That was the way he responded to it. That's just noise. And his point wasn't, he wasn't trying to, I think for folks who didn't know him very well, he that could come off as like passive or dismissive or what have you. But I think what he was trying to say is, how does that concern relate to what we're trying to accomplish together?
Okay.
Right. And if it doesn't, and it's going to happen anyway, and it's out of our control, because that's just some things organizations do, why are we talking about it? Right. But that's what I mean. Leadership, the leadership quality I look for is someone who's not paralyzed or afraid of conflict. Yeah. And
For me,
that's how I would describe it. Sorry, Moose.
thanks. No, bro. Thanks, Chris. If I have to say one thing, Sai, it is going to be adaptability for me, because it brings in the knowledge as a leader and as an entity, as a group, what we have currently, and based on the knowledge and the foresightedness, what needs to happen in future, and adaptability to marketplace, all that stuff. So ultimately, it boils down to adaptability. There are many things, as Chris rightly called out, and even adaptability comes with much more supporting characteristics. And this may, along with adaptability, another thing is ethical behavior. And uh, relatively speaking, ethical behavior might be a relative term for some context, but uh, in generic, ethical behavior is also necessary for leaders.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I like the adaptability aspect of that. What is there?
Mhm.
Because with conflict, it's ever changing.
Yeah.
My one word might be perspective.
Yeah.
Um,
Changing
I
the
love the quote
perspective.
by Wayne Dyer. You change the way you look at things, and the things you look at
Mhm.
change. And as a leader, if you're not capable of changing your perspective and how you view something, you could not only do a disservice to yourself, but to the people that you're leading. I know the Sage Commander doesn't give up. I love this one part. He doesn't give up on um, any opportunities to build trust with
Mm-hmm.
his troops,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that's always that building of relationship, to because you want to be able to know that your troops are going to be behind you when you do go into certain situations. And so a good leader being able to build that relationship with those that he's leading and never giving up on anyone. I believe the Sage Command, there's a statement that he never gives up on anyone. Like there's always an opportunity, a possibility that, you know, we can get through to this individual. And so just having that optimistic view and being able to change their perspective makes a good leader dealing with conflict.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think this brings up a good point, which is, what is conflict to a leader, right? Some leaders see any question. Literally, you ask them a single question. Could be, are we closed on Monday for Memorial Day, as conflict, right? Or it could be, why are we prioritizing this major feature that's going to take us 6 months to build over this other one that I've been working on for a year? I don't understand. And some leaders will write them off. The good leaders, I think that we're talking about here, that we're trying to highlight, are the ones that aren't afraid of either of those questions on either end of the spectrum and anywhere in between. That doesn't mean that they have to answer every question, right? A true Sage Commander and a true leader will know which questions to answer and which ones can just be left out there for no one to answer, right? And that's being comfortable with the uncomfortable. Yeah. My perspective anyway.
I I would definitely, add Cynthia. I love that idea of perspective. I was going to say, which I think is a very related idea. Good leaders are potentially really good at lateral thinking. That they're not stuck into the current situation so much that they can't see parallels with other stories, with other situations, with other businesses they run. That they apply that experience really well. And Chris, to your point about that relationship with conflict, for me, like the best leaders that I can think of from literature, from media, from my own personal experiences, they didn't seek conflict, but they were comfortable, in dealing with it. And I like that. I liked your distinction you made of being selective about what you're engaging with. Like, which, why am I entering into this particular battle with somebody? What, like, do I just thrive on the idea of conflict? Do I think my company is going to be better just because we fight about everything? I would contest that leader. I don't think that that's always the best situation.
Yeah, and in an engagement I'm in right now, I'm actually working to raise leadership's awareness that the team needs air cover, like that, and it's related to that, right? It doesn't mean that the team can't handle their own conflict that they're dealing with, but they need air cover. And I think leaders sometimes think, no, I gave you a job and I gave you an office and I provided compensation, et cetera. That's the entry point. And frankly, any leader can do that. That's empowered, obviously, but providing team air cover implies that you're going to take the hits, right? And I use that phrase a lot in my engagements, for sure. When I'm engaging with leadership, when I'm trying to tell them what the team needs, they need air cover. Yeah.
Okay.
You're muted, Sai, I think. Yeah.
My apologies.
Yeah.
Thank you. So definitely a rich conversation with expansive. I mean, there's more questions that come to my mind just as you're talking about all these different aspects. And I know we're running short on time. So so you're all welcome to come back by all means, as a panel or individually, to elaborate, your wisdom and experiences there. But for our sake, we'll move toward closing comments and then sign off. Words of wisdom, Cynthia, to leave us with.
Conflict is inevitable. I've come to learn that. And the wisdom that's in this book is not only profound, but it's effective. There's a track record to it. And I am forever grateful for the art of war, because it gave me the tools to navigate situations. I'm no longer fearful of challenging situations. Let me say that. Challenging situations where I'm not sure of the outcome. I embrace it, and the more I embrace it, the less threatening it becomes. And so I definitely would advise everyone, not even just leaders, but everyone to, have a read, because this isn't just a professional piece of work. It's for your personal as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Cynthia. Todd, my good friend.
Yeah, this has been an amazing conversation, and wow, so much insight from Cynthia, Chris, Mudasir. You guys are amazing and wonderful. I want to talk more with you all. My reflection at the end of this is something that kind of has been dancing around in the back of my mind, this conversation about the sage commander and the leader, and what is a leader in leadership, and a conversation with another good friend, Sai, that you and I know, and maybe some of you others know as well, as Sahana Chattopadhyay, who thinks and writes a lot about rewilding organizations, rebuilding organizations. I think of a conversation that she was talking about, saying, like, we need to get away from this sense of leaders or as like the hero in the hero's journey. But I think, a lot of organizations have nominal leaders, but I wonder, in thinking about the conversation today, that the best leaders are ones that understand that it's not about their hero's journey. It's about the pilgrim's journey of all of us together going to a place, and recognizing that that leader needs to shine the spotlight on individuals who can lead in moments and situationally across the organization. It's not just that you've got a CEO title on your name, but that you have the wisdom to know when to step aside and let someone else take the lead in those roles. So thank you for spurring thoughts in me today. I've appreciated meeting all of you.
Thank you, Todd. Likewise. Thank you, Todd. Chris, my good friend, closing comments and closing thoughts.
Yeah, well, first, thank you all. And thank you, Sai, for arranging and facilitating and asking us to be part of this. I appreciate the opportunity for sure. And very good to meet you, Todd and Lucas here. My only closing thought is something I struggle with a lot. And maybe it's just part of my own maturation curve, but and maybe a good topic for a future panel. But, should you be able to turn off this awareness muscle that you have? I sometimes think it can easily get in the way of how you're perceived, how you're embraced. It can sometimes even affect relationships. If people think they're constantly being commanded, even if it's through a sage commander type lens, right? Should you be able to turn it off? And I think sometimes you should. And I don't know what off looks like. I don't know what off really feels like anymore. But it's something I'd love to explore with all of you. Yeah. I'll just leave you with that thought. Yeah.
Thank you. Notice here.
Yeah, it was a great conversation, and thanks for sharing your insights. And Sai, my closing thought, and it is ongoing thought that I have whenever I operate with Art of War, is the Sun Tzu's teachings of leadership is to achieve the victory or goal or the outcome through insight and wisdom, not only just with a force or brute force alone. Having said that, every one of us, start with myself, and then every one of us needs to cultivate a balanced and a way to navigate with conflict as well as strategy, and ensuring success, and bring to taking whole whale, that is win-win in my words.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for the wisdom, the experiences that you've shared. Thank you for the audience for joining us today. We've covered so many aspects, and definitively, as if you kind of zoom out, and I'm going to summarize just briefly, to lead, right, in any formal leadership role or not in a formal leadership role, ultimately boils down to fundamentally navigating and integrating those tensions that we call conflict in our common day language, with the intent of taking whole, or taking as whole as possible. And that is definitely a journey that should not be lightly approached, to say the least. In particular, the hook that was thrown out, you threw many hooks out there. The last hook that I'm going to grab, if you will, to be able to regulate one's awareness. Oh my goodness. Is that not the conditioning that we are all on the journey to better and improve? How do you regulate that? That's not easy by all means, but words of wisdom. I've said too much already. Thank you all. You're all welcome to come back. Thank you for our audience joining us and those listening. We look forward to another panel conversation amongst many other conversations around this work, amongst others. Thank you folks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.